need an opener.
Oh, what's up, guys? It's JD here with another educational video. Today, I'm with my friend Colin for a special guest.
What's up, guys?
So, JD and Colin, today we're going to be giving you
Big things to talk about.
a history lesson, a very important history lesson. So, you can see we've came to a kind of historic site here, which is the ocean. And if you didn't know, the ocean is full of water. And there are also things that live in the ocean that are called sea life. So sea life. Oh, badass, dude.
It's already greased a little.
It's already greased, dude. Greasing my john.
It's already greased a little. Let's get into this.
Let's get into it. Okay.
Get to the bottom of Bikini Bottom.
Get
no
to the
pun
bottom
intended.
of Bikini Bottom.
Maybe it is.
All right. So we're going to be talking about the ocean and the start of intelligent life. So intelligent life, for those of you who don't know, just the categorization just means something with the capability to think. So there are many things like bacteria, whatnot, viruses that plankton that can't think because they're not intelligent life. Intelligent life did start in the ocean, and we're going to be talking a bit about how that happened and how there's this modern TV show that's actually an adaptation of a religious doctrine about how life started. So what is this religious doctrine? What's the TV show? Well, I'll give that over to Colin, the talking camera, and he'll start to talk about SpongeBob.
Now, personally, I sort of characterize myself as a bit of a SpongeBob expert. I studied SpongeBob ever since I was a wee little boy. Wee little boy. I've been in the TV. I've seen every document at least 2 or 3 times. Now, I first want to start us off and refer to the episode. I'm blanking on it currently, but we could put that in editing.
Boom, the episode is... I'm not going to edit it
It'll
in.
be down
Guys,
there.
you know the episode. It's an episode where they go back in time.
Where they go back in time, right? So we find a time machine in the Krusty Krab. And what happens in this episode?
Well, SpongeBob and Patrick go back in time, and it's pretty interesting
but
here.
but why did they go back in time again?
Who cares?
No, wait, it's big to the plot.
It was on accident, right? They accidentally cranked
They
it all the way
accidentally that was it. They accidentally went back in time. Now, if we go to the part where they end up in the past, we see a version of SpongeBob and Patrick specifically. But the thing is, Squidward was never there. Now you might be wondering, where was Squidward? The whole point is that SpongeBob and Patrick were the basis of evolution. And the reason I put this to it is because you see other organisms that cannot speak intelligently, such as trilobites and other various creatures in those previous eras, in the Cambrian era. But the only intelligent life forms were SpongeBob and Patrick. They had the intelligence to make jellyfishing at that point. Now, where am I going with this, right? This can be referenced to Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. Now, in the movie, in the beginning specifically of the movie, we see a group of monkeys. They have no clue what they're doing. They simply live like animals almost in a way.
Exactly.
However, a monolith that resembles a rectangle, a square pants, SpongeBob SquarePants. He's a rectangle. A monolith resembling a rectangle spawns on the monkey's home. All right. As soon as the monkeys touch the monolith, they gain the evolution of bones. And you might be wondering, what bones? No boners.
No boners. Okay.
But they get bones as weapons. As weapons to defend themselves, to gain food more efficiently, and they eventually probably go on to discover fire and other things, all from this square monolith. Now, how did it get here, though, Jack?
Okay, well, so this is kind of important. There's a couple of things that we need to talk about here. A couple of things we need to talk about here to really break it down. So, obviously with 2001 A Space Odyssey using monoliths to show evolution, and with those monoliths being a modern interpretation of the true story behind SpongeBob SquarePants, did Stanley Kubrick rip off SpongeBob? So this is kind of one thing we need to talk about, which is that it's a very celebrated movie and it gets a lot of credit, but a lot of that credit actually should be going to the original true story of SpongeBob SquarePants.
Might I add a big point? I believe the reason Stanley Kubrick used the square monolith and didn't directly use SpongeBob is because he was in the Illuminati, a part of the Illuminati, and this can be seen through the movie Eyes Wide Shut.
True.
Where he tells them a year before he dies, he tries to tell the world that he's seen these things and that he knows that SpongeBob is the creator of evolution. He is the monolith in the end.
So Stanley Kubrick was sacrificed by the Illuminati to hide the fact that SpongeBob SquarePants was actually not only the inspiration behind his movie 2001 A Space Odyssey, but also the start of all intelligent life. But here's a question that we really need to talk about, which is if we go to our presentation here and we look at this slide, this very informative slide, you can see intelligent life started with SpongeBob and Patrick. And guys, I don't know if you know this, but this is kind of commonly known stuff about how life works, which is that intelligent life, to reproduce, has to have sex, which means hypothetically it is implied in the story of SpongeBob that Patrick and SpongeBob were the first people to ever have sex, and
thus are the universal common ancestors for all forms of life.
All forms of life, obviously. And you could still see people being inspired by SpongeBob having sex, like how Lionel Rhodes has sex. Also is the same way that SpongeBob and Patrick had sex. And then let's go a bit more into the Illuminati side of things. So Illuminati, what is the Illuminati represented by in the show SpongeBob? Because you think, what? Illuminati? I don't see it that much. Well, that's actually because the story of SpongeBob was originally a play written in 1400 by a man named Jerome Fitzgerald. And this original play, it was a 3-part play, and it talked a lot about the religious ideas. However, in modern translations, a lot of those have been lost, so people don't really know that the story of SpongeBob is an adaptation of the actual foundation of all intelligent life in this planet. This is kind of scientifically proven, but I'll let my friend here, Colin, talk about why is it important that Sandy is underwater. And she's a living life form. She's underwater with SpongeBob, and how her proximity to SpongeBob kind of is a metaphor for the fact that SpongeBob and Patrick were the ancestors of modern land animals.
Well, to get into this, we have to understand that Sandy is a mammal, right? Where do mammals come from? All over the place. But the purpose of Sandy, considering that she's specifically a land creature, not a sea creature, shows the recent development in genetic traits that allowed Sandy to come down. So Sandy came down recently. She wasn't in the past, right? She moved there. She immigrated to the sea, showing that mammals, who are a recently developed form of animals on Earth, came down. Now, what does also Sandy represent? What does she represent in the show?
Sandy represents
intelligence. Intelligence. Now, who's the most intelligent being on the planet who also happens to be a mammal creature?
You did not believe us earlier when we said that 2001 A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick is a ripoff of the original play made by Jerome Fitzgerald in 1600 called SpongeBob SquarePants. The truth is look at the episode when Sandy has her higher-ups come visit her in her dome. Who are they? They're monkeys. Monkeys that were used in 2001 A Space Odyssey to show evolution. So this is kind of just like we're putting it in
a demonstration from it was a hint to Stanley Kubrick and his work on Space Odyssey. They wanted to show that the monolith is indeed SpongeBob, and the monkeys formed intelligence due to the monolith, due to SpongeBob. You know, you see the monkeys on the show SpongeBob, and they were intelligent, showing that intelligence comes from SpongeBob.
Yes. And it's also important to note that the name SpongeBob SquarePants is kind of just a way. Obviously, Nickelodeon is making the show for kids because it is an educational show for those who don't know, because it's teaching about the foundation of life, how life started, and whatnot. So, it's actually not his real name. His real name, obviously, because you think, why is there no middle name? Well, that's because the actual person who the story is based on was not named SpongeBob SquarePants. They were named Sponge Rob Squibbins. Sponge Rob Squibbins? Why would that be changed to SpongeBob SquarePants? Well, that's just because they were trying to find a way to combine it and add in the idea of squares, because obviously squares represent knowledge, and a 2001 Space Odyssey, the monoliths are rectangles. But they just thought Sponge Rob Squibbins into SpongeBob SquarePants. This is very interesting because Patrick's real name is also not technically Patrick Star. And he has a little bit to say about how Patrick's name kind of got reinterpreted into the modern era, because his name is a little bit controversial. A lot of scriptures, if you didn't know, the SpongeBob religion is based on a religious doctrine that was written a couple years before the play by Jerome Fitzgerald in 1600, and this religious doctrine actually is the widest network of connections between any religious doctrine in the world. It actually does have more connections than the Bible, so there are a lot of different interpretations of how Patrick's name came to be. But how did Patrick Star get his name, and how did the real life person Patrick Star get changed into his form that he's represented in SpongeBob?
Well, relating this back to Jerome Fitzgerald's play in the 1400s, we see at the time the ruler of England as King Patrick. Now, how does this relate to Patrick, considering Patrick was so dumb? In the 1400s, King Patrick actually got lobotomized. True story. Look this up. He got lobotomized, and he became essentially a vegetable. He couldn't take care of the kingdom.
He could.
Thus, who had to come in was King Henry. Yeah, King Henry wore square pants.
Mm-hmm. This is true.
Demonstrating that SpongeBob is superior to Patrick because Patrick is simply less intelligent than SpongeBob.
And you could say that this is maybe King Henry being a little bit of an asshole, because obviously everyone at the time, it was more common knowledge, because the religion based around the religious doctrine of the guy named SpongeBob Squibbins obviously adapted into the play SpongeBob SquarePants, written by Jerome Fitzgerald in the 1400s. But King Henry is kind of being an asshole because he's just saying, I'm superior to you, King Patrick. And you may think, how does Patrick Star, where does Star come from? Well, that is because of the way that King Patrick got lobotomized, which is that he fell in the kitchen and his head landed on a cookie cutter that was in the shape of a star that cut through his head and lobotomized him, which is very similar to the fact that you see Patrick Star going into his rock. You think his house is kind of weird because it's just a rock that he lives under. Well, that rock actually represents the head of King Patrick, and Patrick Star going into it is representative of the fact that when the cookie cutter cut a star-shaped head into King Patrick's head, giving him a lobotomy, that's when he became stupid. That's when he became Patrick Star. This is very important. All right.
Now, how do we relate the mutations seen in Bikini Atoll to the nuclear testing from the United States? How do we relate that to the creatures we see in SpongeBob and how that relates to evolution?
Well, okay, so part of this is related to SpongeBob. Okay, so Bikini Atoll, it's thought that SpongeBob is kind of the inspiration for superheroes and other characters like that because of the fact that when you see him in the prehistoric episode, that is still SpongeBob SquarePants, obviously based on the real person, SpongeBob Squibbins. Sorry. So the issue here is that SpongeBob in the prehistoric episode appeared very primal. He did not look like he does currently. He looked like a more primal, underdeveloped person, and now you've seen him become very intelligent. So you're kind of thinking, how did this happen? Well, it's because SpongeBob is kind of in his religious doctrine. He's kind of seen as like a mythological character, not mythological, but like someone with supernatural powers, somewhat similar to like Moses or similar to the Buddha or something. So that's very much how SpongeBob is, but most of his power comes in the form of adaptation and change. And you will see that he is the only character in modern fiction to be able to adapt and evolve instantly. And you may say, oh, think about Maharaga from Jujutsu Kaisen written by Gege. That's not the same at all, because that is actually just stealing the idea that SpongeBob took. And now think about this. Okay, SpongeBob. Think about the cast, okay? Let's think about the cast, okay? SpongeBob has brown pants. Patrick is like a purpley kind of color, okay? Squidward is blue. And Sandy is a squirrel, which is a mammal. And squirrels are actually relatives of foxes. Now, you're thinking, what the fuck are you saying? That makes no sense. Well, the religious text SpongeBob, there are people who very much hate this religious doctrine. Obviously, there are real wars that have happened over the SpongeBob religion. But not many of them are super well documented because they burned down the library of SpongeBob in the 1700s, which sucks because we lost a ton of history, but us being majors in history, it gives us a little bit of knowledge still, which is very good. But this is why it's important, is that people were very against this religion for a very long time, and even in the modern day, those who know about it are kind of, I would just say, pretentious, and they take it very seriously, hating on the SpongeBob religion. And they think the best way they can weaponize it is because the SpongeBob religion is very much so based on happiness, perseverance, adaptation. So people try to take that and reverse it and say, oh, I'm going to make it scary. Okay, well, let's think about this. SpongeBob is very happy, and he's yellow. Okay, he's very happy and yellow. Okay, well, his counterpart is Chica. Oh, Patrick is very dumb. Patrick is dumb. Loki doesn't do anything. Oh, Patrick is Golden Freddy. Sandy, being a descendant of a fox, obviously is Foxy. And then Squidward is blue, and he's Bonnie. So this is very important. Five Nights at Freddy's is a horror retelling of the original story behind the man, SpongeBob Squibbins, who was then adapted into the play SpongeBob SquarePants by Jerome Fitzgerald in the 1400s. And before we wrap up, I just want to let Colin say a little bit more about what is important about plankton and the chum bucket, and how does that relate to human history and the development of current psychiatry and like psychological ideas, I guess I should say, because a lot of the foundation of it is based around the character of Plankton, who was a real person. Obviously, his name was Plankton, first name Plank, last name Ton, and
This is a great question. I get asked this often, a ton by other historians in the field. Plankton is simply a symbolic representation of the 7 commandments in the Bible. Now, you might be asking, how is this true? Well, Plankton is a villain. Villains do sinful things. What does Plankton do? He's greedy, for one. He wants to take over the Krusty Krab. He wants to murder and kill the people of Bikini Bottom all the time, as we see in his dreams. The episode in first season of SpongeBob, where SpongeBob jumps into other people's dreams, we see Plankton stepping on the citizens of Bikini Bottom while Bikini Bottom is on fire. We see Plankton trying to poison people with his chum, his disgusting grub. We also see Plankton being lustful by building a computer wife instead of finding one. So he's also slow as well. Because he doesn't go out and actually have a relationship with someone.
This is kind of interesting. This is something that not a lot of people know, which is that SpongeBob, the religion, is kind of related to, and it kind of is in a feud with Christianity. They don't believe a lot of things that Christianity believes. They're very much more inclusive and progressive. So the fact that Plankton was brainwashing people by feeding them fruit cakes in the Christmas special is kind of similar to, it's a way of throwing shade at the Christian belief that it's wrong to be gay, because fruit cakes is actually a slur that has been used, a derogatory statement towards people who are homosexual. It's a very bad thing. You shouldn't call someone that. We don't condone that at all, but obviously I'm talking about the physical thing being a fruitcake, which Plankton gave out, and that's the SpongeBob creators throwing shade on the fact that some people don't like different sexualities, which is actually very progressive and inclusive of the show. So, guys, it would appear that we found some otters in the water.
Oh no.
What?
This is bad.